Welcome to the show today. My name is Douglas Gabriel, and I'm here with Ron Spence. I want to do a little introduction on Ron Spence, and I want to tantalize you with the fact that the reason we're having this conversation, and it's the first conversation I've had with Ron, is because he has the best questions of anyone around. And he's been with us, working with us, and particularly working with Tyler's team, and making tremendously wonderful contributions to Tyler's Gab site called Gabriel_Horn. And so Tyler said, let's just interview Ron. And I'm saying, wait a second, Ron Spence? Don't I know him? Haven't I known him for years? Because every time he speaks, I go, yeah, that's exactly right. And so we are kind of kindred souls, as it were. And you have an amazing background. But today, what we're going to talk about is not only these great questions you have, but we're going to talk about anomalous behaviors, anomalous activities that are going on all over the world in many, many categories. And you have asked so many good questions about these that people get tired of me coming on and just shooting my mouth off, giving answers when they didn't have a question to begin with. But now we have lots of questions happening in the world. It's an exciting time, and your questions are absolutely pertinent, and you're a wonderful member of our team. And I want to thank you for the many, many years that you've been supporting us. And I would like for us to start off with you describing a little bit about yourself and your kind of relationship to these types of studies. So, Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Douglas. Very much appreciated that I get to sit here and ask you these questions. So let's go to the audience just a little bit and give them a little bit about myself. If you all don't notice, I have to write my notes down. I'm not as quick as Douglas. Anyway, you'll notice me, as Douglas said, I'm on Gab as 777, but I'm on most other sites, including YouTube, with the various form Mr. Ron or 777. And I use that name basically from my esoteric studies of knowing the importance of seven and sevens within sevens and sevens times seven. So anyway, you'll have to look up that one yourself. And I've been been an AIM-CAP since probably its inception, when I knew Douglas and Tyler as Thomas the Pain in the Ass and Betsy Ross. And those two were out there stirring things up left and right in the alternative media. State of the Nation was their base that they worked out of. But I was also into the esoteric, so I happened to find them through both ways and actually figured out who they were, which was quite amazing to see them being in the esoteric and also in politics, because I'm really not into politics a whole lot. I observe, but really not vested. But anyway, that's pretty much our history. And we have a lot of people asking questions right now. And it seems that our history is very mixed up. And so hopefully we can start with that and try to narrow down some things that through our history that we can use in today's society to, one, create a junction between physical science and spiritual sciences, and also bring that to sort of a closure, that we pinpoint things where our history actually landed. So, Douglas, if you're ready, I will. If you have any questions, or
well, I just wanted to say something, and that's that you have an amazing background. When I talked with you in the pre-show conversations, you've studied all kinds of spiritual things, and you're also like an off-grid guy for many years, and you're like myself, no television, none of that nonsense for many years. And now, after basically looking at all that there is out there, you've come to really appreciate Rudolf Steiner.
Yes, thanks to you. I really have come around. I mean, I think Manly Hall was one of my earliest adventures into the spiritual sciences, but everything I see now, he's just repeating most of what Rudolf Steiner had already brought to us, just in his own way of talking. So he's a great man, and And then, of course, you, Douglas, brought me into the Steiner. And basically, after then, I turned off and started studying completely on Steiner just to try to catch up. I mean, I don't think I'll ever read it or listen to every lecture that he has. It's just almost impossible. I don't know how that man did it, but yes, thank you for introducing me to Steiner. And yes, I do have quite a colorful background that someday we'll explore.
And you're an artist also. You do a lot of amazing things, Ron.
Yes, this is some of my stuff that's going out to markets, and I guess we'll start up here in February again as I sit back and I use wood as my medium, and I like to upscale things, which means I take them from a thrift store or a Habitat for Humanity and bring them home and give them new lives and put my artwork on there. And a lot of my artwork is inspired by Rudolf Steiner. See, this art thing is all new to me. I never had dreamed I would be doing art, but it's a long story how I got here, but I'm doing it. And if you look at this over here in the back, this is Steiner. This is the Earth leaving the sun leaving the moon leaving the Earth, however you want to look at it. Just, he inspires me to use my imagination. So this is my life. This is my little shop here. And I have my Steiner lectures, and I do my art, and I have Douglas and Tyler. So everything's great.
Beautiful. Hit me with some questions I can't answer, Ron.
Okay. Well, basically, we have a lot of stuff going on with the mud floods. And, I've been studying a lot through the epochs to see when that could actually be possible. When we had buildings of such perfection and how long those buildings would last, how they become covered in mud. And according to what I've seen in Steiner, there's only two places that could have really occurred. And that would have been back at before the Atlantean catastrophe. Now, the question is, would those buildings last that long? We know the pyramids did. We know the Sphinx did. It's all a question there. And then we can look back at our recent history between the 1400s and the 1700s. Could we have done it there? Those are the only points that I can actually visualize, because at one time we were very, very smart. Before the pre-Atlantean deluge, we had been a civilization for 200,000 years. What could a civilization of 200,000 years actually create? And they were with the spirit back then. They had spirit guiding them. So it was a whole, you really have to develop your imagination to see the world back there. And then listening to Rudolf Steiner's lectures will help you with that, increase your imagination. But Douglas, what do you think on this mud flood? How are we to rectify this in history?
I don't think we can, Ron. And basically, that's why I am a historian. Of course, I have a master's degree in history. And basically, it never added up. None of it. There is no history in any history book that I know that makes much sense. When you look at it, it's one anomaly after the next. Now, let's just start off with some of your very good suppositions and some of your good conclusions already. So as we look at what these people who are basically clairvoyant, who looked into the past, have told us now, right there, that creates a real problem for most people. Clairvoyants told us what happened in the far past. Yes, and amazingly enough, they're more accurate than what I call scientism, theories of science based upon 5 senses instead of the 12 senses. So let's go over this a little bit. Mud floods are absolutely real. Well, basically, you can say most civilization starts around water, whether it's rivers or oceans or lakes, but it's right around water. That water gives them life. That water periodically has what is called the waters of the deep come up and flood everything. For instance, why right now are we having anomalous 30-foot rogue waves hit the shore all over the earth? Why is that happening? Because the fountains of the deep, as the Bible says, there's the waters above, waters below. The waters below, and I'm not going to get into how the waters got there because that's something scientism doesn't understand at all. But basically, around any river, look at North Carolina. There's civilization around the rivers, which created a lot of their tourism, wiped out in a matter of days. And now there's going to be laws that say you can't be near any water because it's too dangerous. Well, water has always been dangerous. It gives us life. It gave us commerce. It gave us everything we need. And yet it also brings cataclysmic destruction. In 4000 BC, we know that in the Fertile Crescent, there was a flood. Now, scientists will say that religious people say that there was a flood, Noah's flood, and they'll say, no, that's not right. These are the people who were in Mesopotamia at that time, and there was a flood of the Tigris and Euphrates. Now, what they don't answer is, why was there a flood? You see, science comes up with results and data, but they don't, and symptoms, but they don't look at the cause. Look closely. Now, how do I look closely? I don't go to scientism. I go to the written documents or the oral traditions. So go back to the Persian oral traditions. What do they say? They say that in an ancient time, and they named the person, that this person got a message from God that in the entire area of Turkey, which is where the Tigris and Euphrates start, that they were told to go into the mountains and dig underground because you're going to need to live there for a long time. Get ready for the snow to come and get ready to catch the snow to get water to feed these underground cities. Every week we find new evidence, and I mean evidence, I don't mean theory, of ancient civilizations where tens of thousands of people lived underground. Okay, why? Climate change, but not the climate change scientism tells us about. But the sun, every time there's a solar maximum, causes such solar forcing of protons, ultraviolet gamma rays, cosmic rays, all this stuff, as well as electromagnetism, all this stuff, solar forcing it's called, hits the earth, creates volcanoes. Right now we're in a solar maximum. And I'm sorry if I said solar minimum before. Solar maximum, where there's a lot of solar flares, a lot of coronal mass ejections, coronal holes, coronal filaments, proton emissions, all these things. When there's a solar maximum, the sun gets very excited. And when it bombards the earth, then it creates volcanoes. Right now we have 77 volcanoes going off. We have rogue waves hitting the shore everywhere. We have 2 massive volcanoes going off in the Atlantic and the Pacific. We have glowing orbs dropping out of the sky, appearing and disappearing. All of these things are phenomena of solar forcing. And the reason that it's so dramatic now is because of what's called the geomagnetic excursion. We have the weakest geomagnetic protective field around the earth that we've ever had in recorded human history. And even scientism predicts that in 100 years, if it keeps depleting as it is now, there will be no life on Earth. So folks, we are in a dramatic time. Are we in a time of another mud flood? I think we've already seen that. I just saw a film yesterday of mud coming out of the ocean and coming up as gigantic waves. And these are in a number of places. I don't believe anything unless I see it usually from someone's cell phone. And it's someone right on the scene and someone who hasn't, of course, just created a CGI or a chat GPT version of whatever. So there are mud floods. We've seen it all over the earth. And we've seen what you pointed out, which is absolutely right. And no one seems to understand this. I think a few people now say it on the internet that I've heard. The angels spoke to those architects. It's as simple as that. No human architect came along and built Cologne Cathedral, the tallest Gothic cathedral. When you stand at the base of that cathedral and you look at it, you can't believe it. And then you read in the records, as Tyler keeps pointing out to me, no, read in the records, they'll tell you they built it in 5 years. Well, when it was destroyed in World War II, it took them, 70 years to build back a portion of it. and it is inferior to the original. So where did the capacity for these builders come from, and why is it hidden? Because it's a historical anomaly. History hides all the anomalies because they have to always be right, don't they? Scientism always has to be settled science from the first moment of a new theory. Theory's thrown out. What happened to the settled science? So in Mesopotamia, there was a great flood. Okay. So you can see, like in the Chaldeans, in Uruk, completely covered with mud and dirt and soil. How did it get there? That was a mud flood. Has this happened in other places? Many, many, many other places. And there's plenty of historical record of it happening, but there's no explanations of it. So what do? Sometimes they just disappear. For instance, the major missing period is from 600 to 900 AD, and it's just gone. So they just made up stuff and inserted stuff. And then, as Rudolf Steiner points out, as we went up from about 400 AD to 1200 AD, we are in a dark age of human consciousness. And there really isn't much explanation for why it is that what was known before as building capacities with stone no longer exist in this day. So your first question touched on so many different anomalies. I can't explain them all or even go into details about them, but let's just say that we are living in the most anomalous time of history. And it's going to take a very powerful new capacity of discernment to be able to tell what's true and what's not true. And so we predicted years ago that, and I'm sure you remember this, Ron, when we said that Eric Schmidt had gone to China and he created Dragonfly. And then when he was asked when he came back to America, well, have you installed Dragonfly here? And he says, oh no, it won't be ready for years. It was already installed here. So all of what you see on the internet, 75% of it is a lie, at least. And so you have to have capacities of discernment that really will be able to show you how to reserve your judgment until you can look at a cause, not just an effect, not a symptom. It's just like the doctors. They'll treat the symptom. They'll never tell you the cause. Or if they tell you the cause, it's something out of their control. And so that's what we're living in. And it's so good when we had a pre-show conversation, Ron, that some of these things came up, and I told you some of my wilder answers to some of these things. But basically, you can just take scientism and demonstrate that history is completely false. That's the reason we created a 600 gigabyte book called Truth History with Michael McKibben and Leader Technologies, and Tyler has recently put that out for people, and you can get it for free. If you want to know truth history, you go there, you Google anything you want, or excuse me, you see how bad we all become brainwashed, don't we? You do a query, and whatever it is, whatever topic you want will come up, including the things that you have mentioned. So I don't know if I answered your question because your question was real big. What part of that should we elaborate on, Ron?
Well, we have to look at this, and a lot of this come from watching Lord of the Rings, and in combination using that as my imagination of how history transpired. But what I'm seeing is when we lost the power of the seed, I'm assuming that, and Steiner says it was at the Atlantean deluge. So from that point forward, I'm assuming that's where we started out on our own as humans to live on this earth. But all these things, like we see these castles everywhere and these beautiful mansions and homes, we know that after the Atlantean deluge, we didn't have the power of spirit anymore, the clairvoyance, and we were basically wiped out. We had initiates that took people across to different places on the planet because they knew the deluge was coming, and then they brought the people to these safe places and started those seven root races over again. So we're starting off basically without spiritual help. Now, a lot of that technology would have filtered down after that from the people who knew it, but they only only lasted so far. But we still have to look at from the point that of their climactical ability to build these buildings and cathedrals and all of those structures that are just amazingly pyramids, on and on and on, to all of a sudden we're fighting with swords, bows, and arrows, and we're sailing around in little wooden ships trying to cross the ocean, and somehow you're not getting, I'm looking at, so when did we haven't been able to grow our society big enough to become aware of why you would build a building in that aspect, because it takes knowing nature and knowing much more than what we know now. I mean, it's like we're dumb now. We are no longer smart enough to build these buildings. Even if we wanted to, we could never, on the scale that they were built, we could never do it. So that's kind of where I'm stuck on the question. Where did we lose our intelligence? Where did, from the intelligence to building these structures to sailing in wooden boats across the ocean and fighting with swords and bows?
Beautiful elucidation, and also it has a bunch of questions I didn't answer. I'm so glad you put it that way. Atlantis sunk in 3, 4, 5 different times. And when it did, of course, oceans rose. You now find off the coast of India, they figured this out by studying, like I do, archaeomythology. You study the mythology, you study the record, and then you believe it. And then you go and look and find it. So right off the western side of India, I forget what the name of the town is that it's near, but they said, well, this is where New Vrindavan was said to be. So they went out in the ocean, went down a little ways, and found New Vrindavan. They did studies and they have assessed, and by the way, I want to make perfectly clear that carbon-14 dating has been proven to be completely, wildly incorrect, and yet they still use it. So anytime we're talking about dates and you're talking about anthroposophy or the inside of spiritual science, the dates aren't going to match up. But they found this New Vrindavan, and they said that it was 9,000 years old. So they started looking, and then what did they find? Well, they went back to the record, and it said here in the Indus Valley and in the valley of a river that no longer exists, the Brahmaputra, or Brahmaputra's one, Indus, and a third one that no longer exists. They looked, they dug down. What did they find? The Harappan culture, which they now date to be 9,000 to 10,000 BC. Well, that's when Atlantis sunk. About 10,500 BC is when some of the last migrations coming off of Atlantis, some left earlier. And the leader of Atlantis was inspired by a being even higher than angels, higher than archangels, time spirit. So what you say is so true. On Lemuria, on Atlantis, those people were led by higher spiritual beings working through their leaders. Human beings had a dull, misty, pseudo-clairvoyance, but they didn't have the human intellect. So when Atlantis happened and Manu brought basically who we would call Noah, through the help of God, intervened, the god Vishnu, in this case, intervened and helped him start a culture which it doesn't exist. You can't hardly find any evidence of it. And the evidence, when it was found, actually within the last 20 years or so, they buried it underwater to make sure no one would ever look at it, because it was a historical anomaly they didn't want anyone to know about, because this would prove that everything that you're told is nonsense. And then that would wake you up to needing discernment. So now every week, bar none, I'm on all the archaeology channels. And so every time they dig up something new, or they find a new anomaly, or the satellites see something in a jungle, and then they go down and they take the growth off of it, and here is a megalithic structure So fantastic. And there's no city anywhere near it. There's no culture anywhere near it. Look at Easter Island. There's no culture left there. There's just a bunch of statues that we couldn't hardly form today. They don't even know where the rock came from. Supposedly the rocks, and of course they always thought the Easter Island statues were this big. They dug down, and as you pointed out, mud, it's twice as big and is buried by mud. Well, how did the mud get on that island? How did the stone get on that island? Who carved those stones? What was that about? So the more research they do, the more they find that they don't know. Now, recently, again, as I've said 3 times now, every week they discover something older than anything they say human history is. They just discovered probably at least 24 different sites that are over 200,000 years old, according to their carbon-14 testing. 200,000 years old? Well, Rudolf Steiner points out that in 3000 BC, when we entered what the Hindus call the age of darkness, the age of Kali Yuga, he says everyone on the earth went to sleep. And sometime afterwards, only 1/3 of them woke up. Now that shows what he's talking about there, who knows? But the point is yes, that is exactly what we know in history in terms of populations on the earth and megalithic builders. Why is it that in 3101 BC, or 3000, right near that time, every culture on the face of the earth started building megalithic structures with understanding of stone building that we don't have today? How did the Peruvians carve those? How did Machu Picchu get built? How did Angkor Wat get built? And the pyramids? Well, they have now shown that pyramids are in certainly every continent, and almost every nation in the world has pyramids and pyramid cities. There are 13 pyramid cities in China, and not one of those pyramids has ever been touched by an archaeologist. They've tested the pyramid that is right next to the terracotta army that's found in China. And what they found is that what's on the slab in front of it is true, that there's a whole replica of all of ancient Qin in mercury, liquid mercury, in this pyramid. And so they don't want to open it up because of mercury poisoning. No, they don't want to open it up because it would show that the Chinese didn't invent culture, that it was, I could go in. If I said this, people would get very upset, but I can tell you where it came from because you can do research on this and find out. But basically, the Chinese don't allow anything to be touched by Western archaeologists because then it would devalue what they believe is their national cultural history that claims that they are the first advanced culture on the earth, which is complete nonsense. So we get all over the earth the results of looking at water levels going down and rising, whether it be glacial movement or ice sheet movement. The ice sheet movement in Michigan, they say, was 2 miles high. I'm not sure I believe that, but it basically cleaned out all and carved out the Great Lakes. Well, at the bottom of the Great Lakes, in Lake Superior, there is a fort that only giants could have built, and it still exists even after the glaciation and after the ice moved over it twice. It still exists. What's it even made of? Do you think they'll go down and experiment to find out what that is? No, because it would indicate that there were giants on the earth. It will indicate that culture in the past was so advanced that they can't imagine it. Matter of fact, they will tell you, for instance, they'll tell you, one of the stories is that the phylacteries of the Hebrews was learned from the Egyptians. And then they'll tell you the nonsense that the Hebrews built the pyramids. No, they didn't. But what is true in that story is they used leather binding to bind their legs, their arms, and their head, meditate on basically the sun at the moment of sunrise, blow a horn from an animal that is, of course, shaped like, the golden mean. It's shaped like Fibonacci series. You blow this horn, and at that moment, you get so inspired that you become superhumanly powerful with strength and with intelligence. So when the people woke up in 3100 BC and entered into the Dark Age, they said, oh my goodness, we still have that clairvoyant capacity. We're losing it. We need to put it into our buildings to show people that we know the precession of the equinox. We know the size of the earth. We knew they knew in 3000 BC, they knew that the earth was round. They knew its size. They knew the exact degree of arc of the curvature of the earth. How did they know the mathematics that we have only in recent history been able to find? They knew it because they were in contact with the beings who make it all work. They're in contact with higher spiritual beings. And then for a while, it was priest kings who led those people. And the priest king told them when to plant, when to have babies, what their job would be at the moment of their birth. They controlled all of society. And normal humans didn't really have clear cognitive capacities, but they still had ancient clairvoyant capacities. So you can find people now, we were seeing the reverse of that. We've ended the dark age. We've entered into the light age, and Satya Yuga, it's called. And what do you see? You can see it on the internet. People invent things all the time that would change the whole world, and they never get done, do they? Because the vested interests, the money interests, aren't going to let go of their flow of money. And so what you get is scientism that serves the rich elite who pay the scientists to make to steal discoveries and patents, but also hide those, some of them, as I just mentioned, so nobody uses them. But they try to invent things that can be weaponized. So, Ron, I'm sorry to have to say that, for instance, you mentioned that Rudolf Steiner and others said that they use the burgeoning seed capacity to bloom, to burst open, to start to grow. So they accelerated seed growth capacity. And this seed growth capacity was a force that they used to run all of their ancient machines, their flying machines, everything to build. They built pyramids on Atlantis. That's why every nation or every group that ever left Atlantis built pyramids, right? It wasn't as a tomb. These aren't tombs. These aren't tombs for kings. It's just nonsense. Some of them were. There were little ones built in Egypt for everybody, but that's not what it's about. It's about contacting the spiritual world. When you lie in the sepulcher of the Great Pyramid, you will, as I did when I was there, have an out-of-body experience. It will just happen whether you like it or not. And then if you have moral capacity, you can ask some questions of the spiritual world and get real wisdom, not scientism, but the wisdom that says, well, all you have to do is understand the motion of water that has been impregnated with metals, and you can cut stone like a laser. And this has been demonstrated. Well, we now have capacities to do things that could far exceed the ancients, but we don't use them because we don't have wisdom.
So what you're actually are alluding to is once the capitalistic culture captured humanity, they set in stone in their writings what was to be believed, and it's pretty much fabricated. Well, I'm with you there. I can't complain. I think everything you're saying is pretty well spot on. And like I said, we're seeing, like in Hurricane Helene, those houses will be forgotten hundreds of years ago, and somebody will go up there digging and say, wow, they had some nice houses up here. But Göbekli Tepe is another. Oh, they filled it in with a shovel. No, they did not fill that in with a shovel. It was a mud flood. It's as simple as that, and it filled in every crevice. I live in the Chesapeake Bay area, and I go out on the beaches a lot. And I can pick up clamshells. Well, this clamshell never opened, but it was completely full of sediment. That's how strange things can be. I mean, I know that at one point the pressure forced that sediment into that clamshell, and it's formed, hardened, and that's where it stayed. But it was never opened. You could see the muscle was still intact and everything. So it's quite interesting how we look back at history. But that leads me into a couple of the things that you had brought up, and one of the ones was water. I really wanted to ask this question about water. We've been poisoning ourselves since probably we started back again. In other words, once we got into this capitalistic culture, and I guess just the dumbed down we've never treated water. And so now what we have is water that is basically contaminated with everything. So that leads me right into ask this question of hand sanitizer kills all the germs. So when we run this water through our water supply plants and treat it, what are we really getting here? It's killed everything as far as I can see, except for some chemicals that they want to put in there. So,
oh yes.
The importance of water is where I'm going with this. I mean, Greenland has all this ice, which probably a lot of it is not as spoiled as the water that we have now, our fresh water supply. Could that be a reason that we want Greenland?
Funny you should ask this question, Ron. You are so point on. Tyler and I got into a big discussion about this. No, she's not going to agree with me on this, but I did a little bit more research, and I have to adjust my opinion. I was yelling at her this morning. Half of the ice on Greenland has salt in it, which means it did not come from the ocean. You know, when ocean takes ocean water and raises it up into ice, like in the Arctic, there's no salt in it. So when you go to the Antarctic, there's almost no salt in that. Why? Because it was snow. And so, I forgot to mention this. The Persian leaders said, get ready, the flood is coming because the snow is coming that's going to literally bury our mountain. And when the snow melted, it created the flood. And so when does snow happen? Okay, let's go to Greenland. Okay, Greenland. I looked for an hour on this morning, and you can hear lies on both sides of this story. The lies are so fantastic. The new lies are so easy to see because they'll tell you the whole thing is carbon dioxide. Really? 2.7 million years ago, according to scientism, carbon dioxide caused the salt-free ice, which is half of the ice on Greenland, which should be called Iceland, as you know, and Iceland's supposed to be called Greenland. So to begin with, it's a lie. And why did they do that? To hide it. Why did they hide it? We won't go into that. But the point is that Greenland is one of the most untouched, vast resources that has yet to be fleeced. Okay, so half of the ice on Greenland has salt and half doesn't. Well, that proves something to you. It proves half of it was from snow, and half of it was from an interaction of flooding, a combination of different things. So right now, they will tell you that, or Trump tells us that he wants Greenland. Okay, well, there's a few reasons why he may get Greenland, and we may get Greenland. And first off, the people from Greenland hate Denmark. And the reason they hate Denmark is because they speak a language in Greenland called Greenlandic, which is an Inuit language. And 100% of the people there are literate in Greenlandic, not Danish, not English, Greenlandic. Now you might say, why would the Danes want them to speak this bizarre language that almost no one, it's literally no one else speaks that language but them. And then they do a literacy test for parents. So when you have a baby, they give you a test. And if you don't speak perfect Greenlandic, they consider you illiterate and they take your child. So Denmark has been stealing children from Greenland for a long, long time. And that's the reason we hear nothing from Greenland. 57,000 people. It's a small town. And when Trump says, it's great, no, what he's saying is all wrong. Matter of fact, the theory we were debating quite loudly, I was debating this morning, is that the scientists say all we need to do is move the cargo ships that come to America from China And sometimes they go into the Great Lakes, and what do? They empty their cargo, and then they have a thing that sucks up the fresh water from the Great Lakes, and then they take it back to China. Did you know this? It's
That I didn't
unbelievable.
know.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And we tried to stop them, and we can't stop them. And no, it did not create the depletion of water in the Great Lakes. That's a myth also. This is a total solar phenomena, okay? It's the solar maximum, solar minimum creates all this stuff. So the water that is on Greenland, Trump has probably been told this stupid theory that they simply take all empty cargo ships, take it there, fill it with water, give it to the number one problem on the whole earth is the lack of fresh water. Now, I can tell you that's total nonsense. You know where Israel gets its water from? The Mediterranean Sea. They desalinate it. They have a way to desalinate as much water as they need. Do they share it with any other nation? No. We know that you can condense water from air in the Sahara Desert. You can build a simple structure made out of wood, and the ancients used stone, and they were actually able in the desert to create ice in these stone structures by simply taking wind or air flowing through, putting it through different convection layers, just like they do with the house for, creating thermal energy from water, so that they can do this and they can do it with the air. So there's no lack of water on the earth. But if you ask the scientists, where did the water come from on the earth? This is what they'll tell you with a straight face. It came from asteroids and comets hitting the earth. That's as stupid as the Big Bang Theory, which they have had to adjust repeatedly. They've added inflation to the Big Bang Theory. Every time they come up with new information, they just expand the theory, which is all nonsense. So Greenland, when Greenland melts, this is a fact, folks. England has been underwater 3 times before. The whole island, from Ireland, Scotland, England, underwater 3 times, raised up. Those are the times when Atlantis was sinking. And if you look at the Atlantic Ocean and the floor, there's the Atlantic Ridge. That was the remnants of Atlantis. Does the ocean floor open up and swallow entire continents? Yeah. Paleomagnetism has proven that. If you take all the land masses and you put them together, they all fit perfectly. So over 75% of the earth is water. And so when you talk about water and mud floods, you're talking about what's called primal water. Below the surface of the earth, deep below, there are not only dead oceans, but there's also massive water being created as well as reserves. That's how we get. Scientism tells us the carbon dioxide created the ice of Greenland, created the ice of the Antarctic. Complete and absolute nonsense. Carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean. It's absorbed by the earth and goes into the earth and goes through a process where it goes down, percolates this primal water that I'm talking about. And this is not a theory. There are people who've made lots of money off of digging one well that had infinite pure water, non-contaminated, non-chemtrail contaminated water. And it isn't from the ancient oceans because they have evaporated a lot. And those are mostly salty, very, 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 very salty. So primal water is at this point not the CO2 that goes into the earth actually brings up the primal water, right? So CO2 doesn't create what they say, well, to a degree it does. Greenhouse gases, there's a lot of greenhouse gases. Methane, all kinds of, you know how much methane there is into the earth that gets released every time that there's an eruption or a volcano? Do they mention methane? Do they try to stop the methane coming naturally into the atmosphere? Do they try to stop the natural CO2 coming into the atmosphere? As a matter of fact, they've just said, and some people say the 77 volcanoes have sulfuric dioxide in it, which is poisonous. Yeah, no kidding. Well, so do chemtrails. They put coal ash, sulfuric SO2, sulfuric dioxide. They put every type of metal. They put aluminum. They put spion, super paramagnetic iron oxide nanoparticle. You name it. Since the 50s, they've been putting it up into the sky, and now people are surprised that the sky is falling and it's coming back down and bringing the higher level plasma balls. These plasmoid balls are dropping down to the earth in unprecedented amounts. We've never seen anything like this in history because why? Our magnetic field is weaker than ever. Sun influences, solar forcing from the solar maximum is happening now. And so it causes the primal waters to come up. It causes volcanoes to come up. It changes the ocean currents. And by the way, no climate change document I've ever seen ever once mentioned the sun. All weather comes from the sun. Anyone who doesn't know that needs to go back to 5th grade science. The ocean currents create our weather along with the jet streams. And this morning, I'm sitting there looking at a screen of the weather patterns we have right now, right? So you got all of America and across the whole southern from Texas all the way to the East Coast, the same exact weather pattern we've had 3 times before. Never happened in history. We haven't had a weather front that was almost 2,000 miles long in human history. Why is it coming? And I said, of course. Did a little search, found some science papers, and guess what? The Gulf Stream has not only began to collapse, scientism predicts the collapse of the Gulf Stream, which creates our weather patterns and also interacts with the ocean streams, which create our weather patterns, will be dead in the year 2025. From what? Weather manipulation. Now, let's go back for a second. 3 or 4 years ago, the number one problem in America was stated by the politicians, by the scientists, as there isn't enough water to feed people in Southern California. So they amped up their chemtrail spraying. And remember, chemtrails aren't sprayed by Americans. They're sprayed by Canadians. It's now, when we busted them, when Tyler and I busted them some years ago, they sold that company. They didn't sell it. They gave the company to the Department of Defense. So now it's a black ops operation that you will never, we don't even put that in the budget. Not even the president knows that, okay? So Southern California started to be hit with the most climate change weather manipulation we've ever seen in human history. And what did it do? The year that they said, this is the last year for Southern California, we have no more water to divert from Owens Lake and all these different places and the giant Sacramento irrigation canals, all this stuff. Southern California wouldn't be able to sustain life. That's what they said just a few years ago. And then what happened? Weather manipulation, and then they got the most rain. You remember, it was just a couple of years ago, the floods in Southern California, and they said it filled up every reservoir. It filled up everything, and the levels of water all out in the west went back up almost to where they were to begin with, where literally they started wondering whether the dams would hold the water again. And now what do they expect? After doing that, they didn't expect that El Nino and El Nino and La Nino, or the two Ninos, those are jet streams. So when they started talking 2 years ago about the polar vortex, there's no polar vortex. That's the collapsing north jet stream. And you can see it, folks. If you just know this and then look at the data, then you can arrive at the proper conclusion. If you arrive at listening to the propaganda that they give you, you will believe scientism fairy tales that are evil fairy tales. The jet stream, all the jet streams are collapsing. The ocean streams are collapsing. The protective sheath around the earth is collapsing. This happens on a regular basis. And mud floods happen usually on 1,000 or 2,000 year cycle in different places on the earth. The big floods of mud floods happen every 6,000 years. The big changes on the earth happen every 12,000 years. That's the reason that Atlantis sunk around 10,000 BC. That's about 12,000 years ago. We're overdue That's the reason the magnetic excursion from the north and south magnetic pole have come towards the equator, and they're about that close. I predict they're not going to go and touch, because if they do, scientism says we're dead in 100. Well, we're dead faster than that. We're dead very quickly. All life on Earth is gone, because without the magnetic shield, cosmic radiation comes in, and it does a number of things. And I want to point this out. This is so critical for people to understand. Humans have mutated over time, haven't they? We know this, but they never once find the missing link, do they? Never once can they find the missing link, and never once can they connect it back to these 12,000 and 25,960 year cycles that are natural. And the geomagnetic excursion, that happens on the sun every 11 years. Every 22 years, it usually means that the sun's north and south pole completely, they go to the equator, they reverse, and they go opposite. You can have a polar change, an axis change in the Earth without having a massive cataclysmic destruction. But you can also have cataclysmic destruction, which we've seen in the past, and this is well known, and it's very well tracked. So every 12,000, we're in the 12,000 year period. So the elite know this. The elite buy people who know these things, like myself. I used to work for the elite, unfortunately. And they will buy this information to protect their wealth, to protect themselves, and to try to eradicate the humanity that will be running wild when cataclysms happen, that they believe will take their wealth and take what they own. So they're worried about two things: surviving the solar maximum, and they'll never say that except in the following. Why did they always target the year 2030? Because that is when the magnetic excursion, if it keeps going at the rate it's going, should touch the equator, and we should have a cataclysm. The elite know this. Scientists don't know it because they're locked up in their own particular silos. They don't talk to each other. There's no synthesis of knowledge from the data. And even if there was, they'd use their same limited perspective to come up with another fake theory. So what we have happening now is that the Earth is being bombarded by the sun. But remember, the sun is our friend. All life comes from the sun, all warmth, light, all chemistry, all valence. The coagulation of cosmic particles, all of these things are because of the sun. The ocean currents move. The jet streams move, and your blood moves because of ultraviolet radiation that goes all the way deep into the Earth. It goes right through your body and motivates your blood. This is well known, but they don't connect it to the sun. You'll never hear anyone say, except I just saw a show. One of the first times I've seen that anybody says this. He's a doctor, and he says, all I have to do is put blue lights, a certain type of blue light, in the operating room, and they've done a study. All my patients come through their operations better than anyone else. And then he says, when he got the statistics, he then says, then I realized all I got to do is take them out in sunlight. Sunlight has blue light, red light, ultraviolet light, infrared light, every type of light, every type of, and a person sitting in sunlight will recover faster. So they did a study on that, and his people recovered like so much faster. It was ridiculous. Every cell of your body that has a nucleus emits blue light, a certain type of very low frequency blue light. We are light beings working in a fluid column that is an antenna that broadcasts and receives. And so here's the thing I'm trying to build up to. When the Earth's magnetic field is depleted, these cosmic rays are coming in, guess what happens? Some people mutate for the better. Some people mutate for the worst. So you see more pandemics are almost always with solar maximums. Every pandemic remember, pandemics don't go back very far in history, and they're able to track them back to solar maximums. So illnesses happen, psychosis happens, every type of illness happens, mutations happen, and mutations can go forward or backward in evolution. So some of us, because the sun is a being, let's just call it that. I would call it Christ. Christ works through the sun. Christ is not the sun. That's what a scientism would say. Oh, yeah, well, let's worship the sun. No, let's realize that's a manifestation of the Spirit. And let's realize that in these most dark times, at this exact moment, we have super quantum, I hate to use the word quantum, super big leaps in evolution for some people. About a third of humanity is right now going through a huge positive evolutionary change towards the Spirit. 2/3 of humanity is taking an equally large step backwards. And the problem is the people who should be studying science, using science to study nature, and these things I'm talking about, no, they use it to build bombs. They use it to make weapons out of everything. If you tell them this is the truth. When they discovered plasmoids in the exosphere and the mesosphere, what's the first thing they did? Turn it into a weapon. And now it's used in all the airplanes as when a missile is shot at them, it's a deterrent, and they shoot out plasma balls, very hot plasma balls from the jet, and then the missiles will chase the plasma balls and explode there instead of on the jet. Okay? You ever heard this mentioned anywhere? They've been using this for many years. Plasma guns, oh, they have that. They have plasma lasers that you work with microwave that can create filament. You've probably all heard of this because they bragged about it. Miles away, as long as they have a direct line, they can send into a soldier's ear a plasmoid ball through a plasmoid filament, which is created by high density lasers and microwave, diffuse microwave, and then they can speak to them at a distance, and they can hear it. They also have created antennas and broadcasters out of balls of plasma, and all of the scientists that are working with fusion energy know that magnetohydrodynamic plasma balls, the only thing that can contain fusion at this point on the Earth in their theories. So now we see plasma balls dropping down here into our atmosphere going wild. Why? Because we've sent up so many missiles to destroy all the atmospheres. So many satellites, the internet, the space stations, drones, high-flying, the SR-71 and all the other 3 or 4 different spy planes they send up into the atmosphere. They poke holes in the atmosphere. So, of course, what we've sent up as chemtrails that goes up and gets totally transformed in the atmospheres as it rises, gets caught in a plasmoid ball because it takes elements that aren't supposed to be there, wraps around it, tries to change it, and when it can't, it brings it back down to the Earth to try to keep us from poisoning ourselves. Nature has wisdom that is so profound that scientists can't conceive of it. And yet the ancients knew this long, long, long time ago.
Well, that was quite a conversation all the way from water in Greenland to plasmoids. But you did say some really interesting things that I like to point out, is how the sun isn't what they say it is. And I like how you said that it does cause mutations. Right now, the sun, we're alive because of the sun. We're alive because of the beings there are sharing their ether, I guess would be the word, or their love down to us, and we're living off of that love. But on the other hand, we could see why people would then move up and then people would move down, because the evil people don't want to be in the sunshine. They don't want the light. They want, because it hurts them. It actually, I mean, I don't want to say it will be a sunburn, but it would be a burn on their soul, because if they're being evil and the light of the sun is shining on them. I love the sun. I'm in the sun. I mean, I look forward to that time every day that I'm in the sun. So that's a lot to be said there. And back to the water issue, is really basically what they're sending to us is dead water through our systems of, what do you call it, osmosis and everything that changes the water, and they treat it. So really what we need to be looking at is a way to get back to good water, good air, which would put us in the ballpark of saying we're climate activists, but we're actually realists in this. You know, that we have poisoned our waters, we have poisoned our air, and unfortunately, we don't own the air around us, so we can't protect it. So we have to somehow, some way, stop these people from damaging and right there in that aspect, if you were to take that mindset, cleaning up our water and our air would employ everybody in the world. Just common sense, yes. And so, yeah, that's been quite a travel through the plasma and all that, which was very interesting, which I've heard a lot of. I've got a lot more questions. I don't know how much more time we're looking at here.
Well,
We're
what I want to
probably
do
close to an
is
hour.
what I want to do is have you tell me whether you'd be happy to come back and do this some more.
Oh yes, that would be great. Hopefully, I can get more seasoned at it and maybe a little more talking time. You know.
Yeah, well, you just summarized in 1 minute what I had a diatribe of 15 minutes to try to say. You see, so this is beautiful because you actually are able to digest this stuff and then bring it back up in a way that people can understand. I'm kind of out there in space sometimes, and I'm a little bit beyond what people are willing to handle sometimes when I tell them facts that shock them. People will say they have to listen to these videos sometimes multiple times because they just go, I can't believe this. But then they look it up and they find that it's the truth, and then they come back. So I hope you will come back, and let's do this again soon. And Ron, I just love talking to you in our pre-show talks and this, and in all your comments that you offer up on Gab as basically a member of Tyler's team. It's just wonderful. And I've appreciated you, just like Tyler said, from the first moment that you were a subscriber and started interacting with us. And I'd say, I've said this to her 100 times. Don't I know him? Don't I know this guy? I mean, we talk the same language, except, just a little bit different presentation. So you'll come back and do more shows with us?
Oh, I would be glad to. And I will look forward to doing that. We didn't get even past the first two questions, so I don't even have to do any work to come back. But as time goes and changes things and things come up, yes. And I hope people will try to take time to use their imagination and start, because your imagination will lead you in the right directions. It's just the way it works. It's kind of like clairvoyance, it's probably the base of clairvoyance that you're looking at right there. So
again,
I hope the audience
philosophy in a way that people can understand it. Thank you.
I hope the audience enjoyed it, and let them vote, see if they want me back as well. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Ron. God bless you. Talk to you soon.